If you thought the Jay-Z and Beyonce saga was over, you better think again because 50 Cent just jumped into the mix, and he's got some hot takes that flipped the whole narrative upside down. You know how fans have been dragging Jay-Z, claiming he's a manipulator pushing Beyonce into some shady stuff. Well, 50's here to spill the tea, saying we've got it all twisted. Not only is Beyonce just as messy as Jay-Z, but he's suggesting she might even be worse, and he came with receipts. And get this, 50 also claims that not only was Beyonce allegedly involved in Diddy's freak-offs, but she is trying to make Jay-Z take the blame for their drama by setting him up for failure and throwing him under the bus when it all hits the fan. Chilly. There's a lot to unpack here because 50's revelations are shocking, to say the least. Grab a seat because this Hollywood drama is reaching new heights, especially when it comes to Jay-Z and Beyonce. If you've been living under a rock, let me fill you in. There are rumors that Beyonce is seriously considering packing her bags and divorcing Jay-Z. This situation has been brewing for a minute, and for a while, people thought Beyonce was ready to leave because she was fed up with Jay's alleged manipulation. There have been a lot of reports about how Jay-Z isn't exactly the poster child for a good guy, with a history of shady business and questionable activities behind the scenes. I won't get into all the messy details of his accusations. I'm sure you've heard the reports by now. For a long time, people saw Beyonce as just another one of his victims, especially given her almost perfect public image and the fact that she was so young when they first got together. Beyonce talked about this in an interview, saying, "I was 18 when we first met and 19 when we started dating. There was no rush. No one expected me to run off and get married." They officially started dating when Beyonce was 19 and Jay-Z was 31, which is a very noticeable age gap.
Item that is allegedly about Beyonce attending one of Diddy's parties and seeming totally out of it. In 2013, the Queen Bee and her husband attended a New Year's Eve party in Miami, which was being thrown by Mr. Freakoff. No one who was there has ever forgotten that night because she spent the entire night in the pool dazing into space. Her best friend, who recently starred in the Netflix movie, called for help, but she was ignored. It's like she was in a trance. And again, this is allegedly Beyonce, Jay-Z, Sean Diddy Combs, Kelly Rowland, who recently starred in Mea Culpa. And the related headline from January of 2014 reads, Beyonce and Jay-Z party in 2014 at Diddy's New Year's Eve bash. It's official, Beyonce wowed on New Year's Eve 2013. While we spent pretty much the entire day getting ready, B said it took her just 45 minutes to look this fierce in her Versace ensemble. And how did Beyonce and Jay-Z ring in the new year? By partying the night away at their pal P. Diddy's bash in Miami. That's how. And how did they get there? By motorbike, of course.
But it's even worse than that because in a 2007 Charlie Rose interview, Jay-Z said he'd met Bey 10 years ago, or in 1997. If they met in 1997, Beyonce was only 16 when they met. In fact, depending on when they met, she could have been 15, for all we know. The thought of Jay-Z, who was in his late 20s, 27 or 28, at the time pursuing a 16-year-old Beyonce, is just shady, to say the very least. Because of all this, people tend to view Beyonce as the victim, often leaving her out of the conversation when Jay-Z gets dragged for his shady antics. Even when the couple is under fire for supposedly blackballing other artists in the industry, the focus usually shifts to Jay-Z and his alleged misuse of power, while Beyonce escapes the spotlight because, well, she's the media's darling.
Could authorities be following him now to make sure he doesn't flee?
Personally, again, this is just my hypothesis. I think they probably are. And I think also they were probably doing that even before the raids occurred. And I've said that before, which is probably why they moved when they moved. I think P. Diddy probably knows that they're following him right now. I have, no reason to believe that they're not, quite frankly, but I think it would be the prudent thing for them to be doing. Now, do I think they are following him in every way, shape, or form and have wiretaps and all of that? That I don't know. They would need to have warrants to do those. But I do think that someone is probably following him from law enforcement at this point, just to ensure that they have eyes on him.
Speaking of that, follow-up question from Athena Tucker on Facebook. Where is he and the plane? Well, it looks like he's in Miami based on the pictures that came out of him at this Topgolf. The plane, last I heard, it was in the Caribbean, but you tell me if you heard something else, Tracy.
So all I know about the plane, as you mentioned, was that the last time it was in the Caribbean, although it looks like its tail number has actually been scrubbed from FlightAware and some of those other apps that are really accurate, actually, quite frankly, in tracking flight data. That is something that you can do. So in my opinion, I think that that was purposely done. And that's why we don't know where the plane is right now. I think he on purpose made sure the tail number was no longer visible in those apps. That is something you can do. And the plane really could be
But
anywhere.
50 Cent is here to shake things up and isn't letting this narrative slide any longer. He's ready to drop some insider information, and let's just say that his thoughts on Beyonce aren't exactly flattering. When blogger Storm Monroe first shared the news of the divorce a couple of months back, everyone was rallying behind Beyonce, praising her for taking a stand and leaving JayZ for good. But now, with 50 Cent's comments, it looks like we might have been wrong all along. From what I've heard about them as a couple, they've been living separate lives for a very long time. So they're together, but they're living separately. And part of the reason why they have already been living separate lives and why we may actually see one of the biggest divorces in Hollywood is because JayZ is up next to be exposed. There's only so much of these stories that JayZ can pay off or block. He won't be able to stop this, and she knows it, and he knows it too. As far as who's going to be the breakout victim in this story, I don't know. I might have to ask someone, I don't know. But I'm just letting you know that once that comes out and JayZ is exposed for his nefarious past, you're going to see Beyonce. She may or may not do an interview, but you're going to hear their publicist release something. She's going to say, oh, the Carters have been separated for some time.
Biggie lyrics. Biggie been telling y'all how he been in his lyrics. And our girl Lil Kim talking about how they used to do the butterfly dance, how they used to get naked in front of each other and be dancing and shit. Birds of a feather flocks together, right? Ain't that the term my grandma used to use? And so, I've been telling y'all, so Suge know that they weird and weirdos, so he ain't gonna beat up on them too much. That's your float, that's what float your... But then everybody that I fucked with did. Everybody, all of them. No names mentioned yet. But that ain't the only one that Jay had when she was underage. Y'all remember Fox Brown and Jay? Ain't no woman like the one I got. No one could love you better.
Fans were living for the idea of Beyonce leaving JayZ, especially since Storm hinted that Jay was about to get exposed big time. And I'm not talking about a little bit of gossip here, I mean something huge, like Diddy-level exposure for some wild things he's done in the past. What's wild is that Storm wasn't even the first one to drop this tea about JayZ facing the music. After Cassie's explosive lawsuit that took Diddy to task over some truly horrific stuff, Jaguar Wright stepped in to say JayZ was next in line to be exposed. She even claimed that the reason JayZ hadn't been exposed yet was that he's just smarter and more careful than Diddy. But his luck has run out, he's patient, he's not sloppy. For 30 years, he's been lining up people he calls friends and stepping to the side while they get hit by the guillotine. You know what they say, birds of a feather flock together, and it looks like that might just be the case with JayZ and Diddy.
One of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable and the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profit. Remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who receive funding from the government based on the number of inmates.
Mm-hmm.
The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons.
Mm-hmm.
It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become solid investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us...
The streets are saying that JayZ might be just as shady as Diddy. And considering all the allegations against Diddy, folks were low-key relieved to hear Beyonce was thinking about divorce. On top of that whole age gap thing, let's not forget that JayZ has cheated on Beyonce multiple times over the years. I'm not just talking about that infamous Becky with the good hair drama. He's been cheating since the very beginning of their relationship. Reports say Jay started cheating just a few months after they got together, and one of the first names that popped up was singer Charlie Baltimore. If you've been following this mess, you probably caught the rumors about their affair happening right under Beyonce's nose. For those who might not be up to speed, Charlie Baltimore used to date the legendary Notorious B.I.G., aka Biggie Smalls, back in the day. Reports say she eventually got tired of being the other woman while JayZ flaunted his relationship with Beyonce, so she decided to cut things off with him. But JayZ didn't handle that well at all.